Do you want beautiful looking floors? Don't be discouraged from ugly yellow floors like this. They could look like this. Now if you have pre-finished floors, don't worry, they can be sanded, but it is a lot more difficult than regular floors. Because of these grooves in them, they have about 7 layers of sealant on top, which is really hard to sand down. The reason you want to sand down past the grooves is so you have a nice flat finish, which is hard to achieve with pre-finished floors. Starting off on your belt sander, make sure you get a 24, and you're going to be going in a straight line, not diagonal. And I'm using a Hummel belt sander for my main machine. Now this takes a really long time, but you want to really sand down all the way past the yellow lines, and you can see them disappear in this time lapse. Now that you have finished sanding with your 24 going in a straight line, you're still going to have these grooves left over with a little bit of that old color in them. Next thing you want to do is get a 40 grit sandpaper for the belt sander and go at a 15 to 45 degree angle. I recommend staying a little less than 30. Here with the 40 grit, I'm going at about a 15 to 25 degree angle. Time for the fun part. Get yourself a putty knife and a lot of putty matching your wood species. I'll be using red oak. And what you're gonna wanna do is fill in all the gaps that are left from the 40 grit. Doing this ensures that none of that old color pops through when you add your new stain and poly. And always make sure to putty up any holes that you see or anything that you would like to kind of hide. Right here I'm trying to show you guys what it still looks like after 2 passes with the belt sander. As you can see, these grooves will not go away, so I will putty them up, and I have to do the whole house like this. Doing this really ensures a clean finish. Now after you go over with the big machine with the 40 grit, you want to get to your edger and get a 36 or 50 on there. I'll be using a 50 grit. And you want to go over all the borders and anywhere the big machine cannot make it. After hitting it with the 50, you want to do a clean pass with an 80 or above, but an 80 will cover a 50 grit, so I'm sticking with an 80. With your final pass on edger, I'm showing you how you need to go with the grain and back and forth with the wood. You do not want to go side to side. You could do that with the 50, but not on your final pass. After doing all the borders with an edger, you want to get back to your belt sander with an 80 grit. This is your final pass. It's going to give it a nice, smooth, clean finish. With the 80 grit on the belt sander, you want to go straight. No diagonals anymore. You're cleaning up any marks that the 40 left from the big machine. After finishing up with an 80 on the belt sander, you're going to get this line that shows up. This is good as long as there are no grooves or hard stop lines. You're going to get these edger marks that are left over. Next thing we're going to need to do is hit it with a 6-inch orbital sander with the 60 grit on it. After passing with the 60 grit all around the border and anywhere where there's this line happening, you're going to want to move on to scraping the corners, and we are almost done. Now moving on to the buffer. Get a 100 grit screen and your buffer. We work with a vacuum when we buff, but that's optional, but you will always still need to vacuum after this process. You don't want to move too quick with this, and you want to take it nice and slow, but do not sit in one area too long. Always move with the grain back and forth from wall to wall. Next step, let's vacuum all the dust up. Now we are using pickled oak min wax stain. Make sure you have a white thin pad or a carpet that fits under the buffer, and you want to go around the border by hand and then pour out a little puddle onto the floor and cover it with your pad or carpet and get the buffer on top, and it goes real nice and smooth. And to wipe it off and dry everything off, we have a clean dry rag that we go after this process and dry it all up. Here's what it should look like when you have your stain applied. You do not want any imperfections on the border of the rooms. As you can see here, there's no lines from the big machine, no edger cuts, nothing. That means the process that we just did was done correctly. Now letting the stain dry 24 hours, we're moving on to sealing the floor with polyurethane. We are using water-based Bonatraffic HD for our process, and we're gonna apply 3 coats of this. We're using the roller method with the microfiber roller, and if you want a more in-depth video of how we do this, check out the link in the description. After applying the first coat and letting it dry fully, you're gonna need to apply 2 more coats. Make sure to buff between the second and third coat.